Don't forget that this tutorial is part of a series of tutorials which you can access on our YouTube playlist, or alternatively, if you would like to, you can purchase the whole course on Udemy. There should be a link to the YouTube playlist and a link to our Udemy course, which should always provide the best price in the video description. Now that we have learned how to create a migration, let's talk a little bit about making some changes to our model and dealing with some of the common issues that you might come up against. And generally that is adding fields that have maybe required values. The first type of changes that you might want to make in your database are trivial changes. For example, here I'm going to change the attribute max length to 200. So that might be something that you want to change over time. If we take a look at the attribute table, which is going to be inventory underscore attribute, so it is in alphabetical order, you may have noticed that. So inside of here, let's take a look at the name. So at the moment, the varchar is set to 100, and we're going to change the max length to 200. So this is something that we need to migrate to make those changes. Right, so with that done, let's go ahead and just go through the process again. So first of all, we create the migration file. So notice that this is a new migration file, alter attribute name. It tries to name the migration. And then inside of the migration file, we have the changes that are going to be made. So the changes, the model name, the name field, and then the change that we're going to make. So that's the max length. So here you can just see that it's describing the changes that we need to make. So this is a history, a record of all the changes that we have made in our models, in our database. So with that said, we'll just go ahead and run the make migrations again and then migrate. And you can see everything was absolutely fine. The migrations have been performed. So let's go back into our database. We just need to do a refresh, and you can now see it's set to 200, the name. Now, more interestingly, in the database, if you take a look at the Django migrations table, this is a record of all the migrations. So the database is also saving a record of all the migrations. So if I right click on that and show table, just bring it over to the left-hand side here, we can actually see the data in the database related to the Django migrations that we have performed. So at the bottom here, we have our inventory, and then the migration that we have just completed is right here at the bottom. That was the alter attribute name. So Django, in addition to creating migration files, also keeps a record in the database. It will be very simple to make changes to any component here within our models. Where it gets a little bit trickier is when we add, say, for example, a new field which is required. Now, what we need to remember here is that if we add a new field and it's a required field, if we already have data in the database, then that will mean that we also need to populate that field for all other records in the database because it's a mandatory field. So that's where it gets a little bit trickier to make changes. So that's what we're going to take a look at in the next tutorial.